Premier win. How often did you make a trip to Home Depot in your F-150 to pick up plants for the cottage? Without your detail, by the way.
Well, okay. So first part of this story, the magic sort of ability of Doug Ford to escape his detail. Nonsense. I used to go running in the morning on a weekend before my detail got there, and they were nowhere in sight. And one time I went running and I actually met them. They were on their way to my house and they were early and I was out running. It's like, oops, I'm not supposed to be out here. So the fact is, the fact that he went to the store without his detail, not a big deal. Doesn't make him Wonder Man, Superman. But I really think that yes, there's a humorous side to this. But honestly, I think it's dangerous. I think that that kind of vigilante behavior. So he's a big white guy who happens to be the premier, and he takes on somebody in a parking lot. Like, is that really what we want modeled for kids? Is that really what we think a premier should be doing? I think it's dangerous. And I think, either he was competing with John Burnside, because Burnside did the same thing in Toronto, but I don't think Burnside threatened to beat the guy across the parking lot, because that's the other aspect of this. The language that the premier used, I found really kind of shocking. And I understand that, and I heard people saying on the radio the next morning, well, this is why people love Doug. Well, okay, maybe, but that's not what leadership looks like. That's not part of his job as the premier. And I think it sets a really dangerous precedent and is a really unfortunate role model for everyone else.
For those of you who weren't in the room, the premier was sitting down with Ben Mulrooney at the Empire.
A couple months ago, I pull in, I escape from my detail at 8 o'clock in the morning before they come, and it ticks them off. So I hop in my pickup and I want to go to Home Depot. It was on a Saturday. And I pull up and I wanted to get some plants. Actually, it was the weekend before the Prime Minister came. I wanted to get plants for the cottage, so I loaded up. And I pulled up right by the nursery. I think the majority have been to Home Depot. So I pull right up, I load up all the plants, and I'm ready to pull out. And here's this guy with a backpack and, a bag. And he's walking out, and the store manager's yelling at him, come back, and the security guard's there. And I said, well, go get him. We aren't allowed to go get him. And so he went around the side of where all the plants and outside the parking lot. So I was in my car, I said, screw this, I'm going after this guy. So by this time, my heart's beating, I'm ticked off. So I go racing behind, no one can see, and I pull up behind him and jump into the car. I said, buddy, what's in your bag? Nothing's in my bag. I said, buddy, I'm going to kick your ass all over the parking lot. Show me what's in your bag. And I did. I couldn't help myself. And so I said, buddy, come over here. Nothing's in my bag. And so we start. Now, by this time, the store manager comes, and he's on fire. He's cursing and swearing. I guess I threw in a couple colorful language, too. And so he's emptying out his bag. And all of a sudden, so he said, nothing's here. I said, how about your other bag? It's because he dropped it and heard a cling. And so he went in there and he pulled out one of those saw blades that you open up. Yeah. And you can use it as a saw blade. And the store manager said, that's what he stole. And then, we start saying da-da-da-da to the guy. And then I said, keep emptying out the bag. He pulls out some cutters, tin snips. And by this time, I'm in a pretty rage. I'm just in a full out rage on this guy. And I said, buddy, you stole those too? And he goes, I swear to God, I didn't steal them. He said, look at the rust on them. I looked at them, they were rusty. I said, okay, those are yours, but the rest? And then I went on to tell him if I ever see him in the parking lot, he's going to get a beating like he's never got before.
Tim?
Well, number one, masterful storyteller. I was there. And, there was this point where he turns just before the tape. He sort of looks at the audience, he looks back at the host, looks at the audience, and I shouldn't probably say this. And then he can feel it. And the premier will appreciate this too. Like his staff are probably ready to run the scene saying, no, you're going to go off our message of getting the house back and, fighting back against tariffs. But number one, a masterful storyteller. So that cuts through. this isn't about expecting, Premier Batman or Premier Ventura running around the province. This is really about tapping into the frustration that so many Ontarians feel with crime, whether it's stranger attacks, getting your car stolen, break and enter, stealing off the shelves. So I think a lot of people identified with this, not because they want the Premier to beat people up, but because they just feel so frustrated with rampant crime.